Welcome to Pesci's Recovery Corner. This is a recovery podcast. Recovery from what? Recovery from addiction, alcoholism, mental health. We have all different types of people that come on this podcast. Many of them are in recovery. We also sometimes have people that are professionals that work in the field, that are on the front lines dealing with people that need recovery or have recovery or are gaining it. Today we have a very special guest. It's actually, today's a very special day because there are people that stand out to me, people that are like my favorite humans, right? And I've got a handful of favorite humans, and one of them is David Wiss. Welcome to the corner.
Bro, thank you. You're one of my favorite humans as well.
Thank you. I was actually reflecting today thinking, how long have I known Dave? And I think I met you in 2014, so it's been a decade. Time flies. You were a lot younger, and I was younger too. But I've been, a major fan of what you do, who you are. David is, how long are you sober?
17 plus.
17 plus. I think you got sober probably like 10 months before me. So around that time, seemed like nothing might have been working for us anymore, that we were forced into going into recovery, and it just turned out to be the best thing that our lives could ever encounter.
That's right.
Now, David he does a lot. We will get into what he does as a professional, definitely, but usually on this podcast, we like to hear about your history, about how you grew up, where you grew up, what your family system was, if there's addiction in the mix, how that all happened, and then I want to get into some really special stuff. Today, actually, the topic today is cross addiction, everything from caffeine to nicotine to ultra processed foods to even exercise. We'll talk about all that too. But Dave, again, welcome to the corner. I want to hear about you. I want to know about your upbringing. Where you were born, where you were raised, all of it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
I was actually born in Boston, and I came to Los Angeles before I can remember. So I have no memories of Boston. It's funny, my dad wrote an autobiography recently,
Right.
and he's retired, and he wanted to put his legacy in documentation. And I read it, and there was a part of his book that was new to me. I learned that when we were in Boston, he lived in an attic, and there was mold growing there. And I had bad asthma as a kid, and I was taken to the hospital, and I learned that I had kind of heard about, I knew I had asthma as a kid,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that there was a toxic mold exposure when I was an infant that like potentially caused some health problems for me.
Right.
And it's funny, I read the book and I was like, Dad, I study epidemiology, right? Like, I understand risk factors. Like, how come we never talked about this, right? Like,
You're just now learning
yeah,
this.
this early life adversity probably was a risk factor for me becoming a drug addict, Dad. Do you realize this? And he was like super uncomfortable. I think he went back and did a second revision of his book and removed that. But needless to say, I had some health challenges early on in life with asthma. And I don't know how important that is, but I know it primed my nervous system,
Sure.
I believe, right? Because my brother didn't end up on the same trajectory as me. On my dad's side, there's no addiction. On my mom's side, there's a lot.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of alcoholism.
Okay.
And, a lot of her brothers died young, chronic disease, cigarette addiction, alcohol, drug use. There's a lot of cancer on my mom's side of the family.
Right.
So I believe that I picked up a lot of those predispositions. And, there's ongoing debate about nature versus nurture and all that. And I don't know how important it is for some people, but I do believe that I have the biology that would have set me down the path of some sort of addiction, regardless.
Right. If it comes down to genetics, in my family system with my dad's dad in Iran, he was an opium addict. So I think it skipped a generation because mom and dad, my parents were not into drugs, but it definitely my sister, me, and even my cousins in Iran, even them too. So who knows?
The generational trauma, the addiction, it's in the germline, and you set up the adversity and the exposure in the environment, and it's a perfect storm for someone like you or me. That comes from, good families otherwise, right?
Right.
So by the time I took my first drink at age 12, like it was crystal clear that there was something there for me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like it hit me down in my legs,
Right.
right? But before beer, there was food. The food did something for me that I didn't do for my brother.
Sure.
I remember like sneaking craft singles and, picking my friends in elementary school based on what they had in their lunch.
Right,
you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Like I wanted to go to
The
their
good
house.
snacks.
Yeah, I wanted the good snacks. Like my parents were cool with snacks, but some of these snacks were outlandish.
Yes.
And I was super interested in hanging out at your house
Right.
and seeing what was in your cupboard, right? And I remember that stuff from early on. And it suggests that I'm primed for addiction-like neurobiology. Whether or not the adversity with the asthma had something to do with it, probably.
Right.
But my addiction legacy goes back to me being a baby boy, And so when I took my first drink, I don't know, I must have been 10 when I smoked weed for the first time. I was age 12. This was early 90s, right when Dr. Dre, The Chronic came out.
Yes.
I remember being in 6th grade,
Right.
7th grade.
Weed was popularized
It was
at this
popularized and it was definitely inviting. It was a culture that said, hang out with us,
Absolutely.
right? Be a part, join the movement. My mom was part of the hippie culture movement.
Right.
So my parents were no stranger to that kind of energy.
Sure.
But I want to just give a shout out to my mom who has that spirit of counterculture. She stood up for things that she believed in a
Right.
time that was right. And she's a little revolutionary.
Nice.
And I picked up on that too.
I love
know
that.
what I mean?
I actually love
Yeah,
that.
I have that in me. So when I found the rave scene, as a teen, it was definitely calling my spirit.
Can you remember the first time you went to a rave? How old were you as a teen?
So I was 17.
Okay.
In high school, I went to public school
Right.
in Los Angeles, and a lot of crime and drugs in that setting.
Yes.
A lot of weed smoking, very normalized.
Yep.
I definitely was one of those kids that could get high every day and still do good in school.
Did you? Did you do good in
I
school?
did
Yeah.
until around 11th grade.
Okay.
So like if you look at my high school transcript, it was like straight A's and I'm getting high every day.
Right.
And you can imagine what that does to someone like me.
Right.
I start to get a God complex, but I can really live these double lives successfully.
Okay.
And I did. At some point, like I think 11th grade, we had a gate key. I could come and go as I pleased from the high school. And we had friends with cars and
Right.
people that lived nearby and the ditching and all the stuff that a lot of us do. But I was a baby boy. I wasn't like a fully developed man. You
Right,
know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
Sometimes when I look at little kids that are getting high and I think like, wow, like little, like, 15, 14, 13.
Yes.
Up to no good early.
Right,
You know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
Yeah. So, what else can we say? The rave scene.
Yeah.
That's the real kickoff where it was like, now it's not just, marijuana. I had done mushrooms. I had done the classic kind of socially acceptable drugs at this point.
Yes.
But when I went to my first rave, it was 1999. We had just graduated from high school. I was 17.
Right.
And we flew up to Oakland to go to a rave called Metropolis.
Yes.
A legendary rave. And they had underground hip hop playing.
Right. Right.
So I was into rap music, bro.
Sure.
And the rave scene was traditionally like trance and house.
Everything had its own section.
It kind of had its
There was
own
always
section.
there was a hip hop room.
Right. So there was jungle and drum and bass,
Yes,
which was like a little in between. And then they brought in the underground hip hop
Underground. Yep.
into the rave scene. And it was like, oh, this is where I belong.
Right.
So I was pretty clear that I had found my home, right? I was a part of life at last.
I was there. I was right there with you, although I was just 10 years older. So I was like in the end of my 20s. I'd already been doing the rave scene thing since like 88, 89.
Okay.
I actually watched it kind of originate in LA.
The early days.
The early days when it would be
Yeah.
like break into warehouses
Yeah.
or like a nightclub or go from one place to another place and get a piece of paper that showed you where the next place is and drive all around town until you finally get there. And once you get there, it's on and popping.
It's so on and popping.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard about the earlier days.
Yeah.
I got to come in before it was commercialized,
Yeah.
before there was events with real security.
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
yep.
So I got in the sweet spot,
Sure.
99, 2000, 2001, 2002.
Right.
And of course that came along with staying awake
Sure.
for days
I
at
mean,
a
the
time.
MDMA, the type of ecstasy that they were distributing and you could get back then
Yes.
would talk to a brother. I mean, it was
Hi.
it was enticing,
Very enticing.
blissful,
Yeah.
euphoria at its finest. How would you not want to do it if you're already a semi-poly substance abuser and then you come into the scene where they're giving you a drug that's like the best feeling out of all of them?
Perfect storm.
How are you not going to do that?
First rave I went to, I candy flipped. That's
Right.
acid and MDMA.
Right.
and we were tagging on the wall. You know what I mean?
Right.
The rap music, Bay Area.
Yes.
We had a limo, we had a crew.
Right.
I mean, it was very salient. And so
Right.
I chased that
Sure.
for many, many years. I was also in school at the time. I went to USC.
Okay.
I was very fortunate to get in.
I didn't know you went to USC.
Yeah, I went to USC for my undergrad.
Wow.
My life dream came true. I got to move from West LA to South Central.
Right.
And I got to live in that part of LA.
Now, did you get into USC because your family was already, did your dad go there?
My dad actually worked there.
Okay. He worked there.
Yeah.
So that was an easy in.
Yeah. My dad worked at the county hospital.
Oh, okay.
And he taught classes at USC.
So was it hard for you to get in, or did you have good grades, or were you already like
I think
in the
there was an
education
angle
system?
there.
Yeah.
It's a private school.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
I believe that I worked that angle there.
Right.
I had decent grades, but I didn't apply to a lot of places.
Okay.
I wanted to go to USC because I did not want to leave LA.
Right.
I had a foundation in LA. I had plugs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I was
Yeah.
networking.
Yeah.
And when I, moved to the downtown area,
Right.
I stayed very well connected on the west side.
Oh, I could imagine.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I was a valuable resource, especially at USC because I knew everyone from LA, right? So yeah, I made some money, needless to say. And of course, with school comes homework. And with homework comes Adderall. And with Adderall comes meth.
Okay.
Right? So
Right.
that was definitely a part of my story.
Sure.
Yeah.
And with Adderall, when you were doing Adderall as a student, was it prescribed or was it
It was readily available
readily
for
available?
trade.
Okay, it
You
was
know what I mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
barter system?
Barter system.
Yeah.
That was the game.
All right. So then meth. Why did it become meth? Was the Adderall just not enough?
Meth was so disgusting and socially unacceptable
Yeah.
in the hip hop culture.
Yeah.
It was very clear that you could smoke weed, you could drink alcohol, right? And there was a couple other drugs that were on the maybe. And at this time there was promethazine with codeine,
Okay.
the syrup.
Okay. So that was already a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the cutting edge of that. I mean, that was really early 2000s.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is the beginning of the opioid epidemic. And, the first wave of the opioid crisis when the OxyContin 80s really
Sure.
started to flood.
Yes.
2002, 3.
Yep.
We could get 80s in bulk.
It was not hard.
It was not hard.
There was dirty doctors all throughout Southern California that I remember being able to gain access to. And I never did. I got them from the doctors to distribute them to my heroin using friends because they like to shoot that shit.
Right.
But me personally, I was a tweaker at that point. I already had my opiate era. But at this point, it was like, get those 80s. And I didn't even know what I was getting because those were like the shit.
the thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember having connects where it seemed like there may have not even been doctors involved. Like the truck went off the freeway and ended up in a different neighborhood or
Right,
something.
just happened to fall.
The amount of supply that they had was,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like who could go buy 1,000 Xanny bars?
Right.
Like how does that come from a doctor?
Right.
I bought 1,000 Xanny bars before.
Right.
You
And
know what
those
I'm
were
saying?
the legit ones.
The legit
Yeah.
ladders. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah, I was blown away. But I was able to manage pretty well for many years.
Right.
At least like presenting my stage character and, being in school. I started to struggle a lot with school.
Well, how many years were you in at that school?
7.5 total.
And was the reason that you were there that long because of what you were studying, or were you just not performing well?
Oh, I took 1.5 years off
Okay.
to go to 3 treatment centers, 2 correctional facilities, and 1 hospital detox.
And the correctional facilities was because of slinging dope?
I had 2 cases.
Okay.
The first was a felony DUI with great bodily harm
Right.
and a hit and run. So I fell asleep driving. I was responsible, and I rear-ended someone. The airbag came out, and she had a stress fracture on her cheek.
Oh.
She actually turned out to be a secretary for a civil law firm. So I got sued. There was a civil suit and a criminal suit. And I was super resentful for many years because, her car bumped into someone,
Right.
and it was like a homie, not someone I knew, but someone that was in the life.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like, damn, this is, messed up. It was a Friday night.
Right.
And he was intoxicated. and I felt this is a dark story. I'm gonna tell you the truth.
Tell it.
I woke up from a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fancy car, a nice souped up Audi.
Right.
Okay. And she's hurt. And there's someone that she hit, and he gets out, and he looked like someone from possibly one of my circles.
Right.
I was more concerned about him than her because I didn't want to get him into trouble. He was intoxicated. He wanted to leave the scene, but he had a little dent on his car.
Right.
And he said, "Hey, can you just fork me a few $100 so I can leave?"
Right.
And that made sense to me.
Right. In that moment.
In that moment, I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't want to take you down with me. There's obviously something that's going to go down here.
Yeah.
Let's get you out of the scene."
Right.
And so I walked across the street to the ATM, and I got arrested there. And I ended up getting a hit and run.
Oh, because you left.
Because I left.
Which was right across the street.
Yeah, but I was walking in the opposite direction of the scene.
Right.
So it's a very clear thing. And
They're
I remember
basically going to say, you're not here. You're leaving this spot.
I had resentments for years because I felt like I was done dirty. I
Yeah.
had charges that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
And I remember carrying that energy of like, damn, why is this happening to me?
Right.
Right? Not being able to see that there was also a time that I swiped a thing and
Right.
more than one
Right.
that I had sort of been drunk and sort of left the scene. But of course I'm playing that victim kind of mentality,
Yeah, which we do.
right? The system's rigged against me,
I'm sure.
right? Now I'm going to get
Every time I
sued.
get locked up, it's their fault.
It's their fault.
Or they got me all wrong.
It was those dirty Culver City detectives.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you took a break. Obviously, these things happened. You went to treatment too. Were you going to treatment to look good for the courts?
Yeah.
Or to address your addiction? All of it?
My first treatment was like the classic, go to a place and, present that, as part of this case.
Yes.
I wasn't ready. I remember making pay phone calls, making moves back in LA,
Right.
making sure everything was still in place for
Right.
when I came home.
Right.
And I remember making friends in that first rehab that I got loaded with.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I was that guy.
Were you in your early 20s or late teens?
I was in my early 20s
Early 20s.
at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But very much, immersed in the culture,
Sure.
fast money, music culture,
Yeah. The music, the swag,
underground culture.
Yes.
That's a hard thing to dissolve.
I mean, growing up in Southern California, especially in that era, I remember it wasn't just that there was diverse races, all like different types of people,
Yes.
but also who you were, what your persona was, what you're a part of.
I invested a lot
Sure.
in the look.
Yeah, yeah.
All the clothes that I had.
Yep.
It wasn't something that I was able to shake.
Yeah.
But the idea of like getting sober and shaking the drugs and still being that guy
Yeah.
appealed to me.
Sure.
Like the fantasy of like, okay, it got dirty and it got messy.
Yeah.
You sort of clean up your act and now you just kick back and watch the youngsters and
Yeah.
still be that guy. I thought I could pull that off.
Right.
Right. That didn't work so well. So I ended up going back out, and because I had some, financial issues, what do? I doubled down.
Right.
Going to try to make more money quicker
Right.
and do the thing that I was doing. And I ended up with another case, possession, and this happened in Culver City. And again, they ended up taking me into custody, and there was some foul play. They like put something on the floor that wasn't supposed to be there.
Right.
And they said, "This is yours." They took me in, they took my keys, and they went to my crib in Los Feliz, and they just let themselves in. And I remember being so angry
Right.
that they were doing this to me, right? Of course, they got away with it. You know what
Sure.
I mean? But needless to say, I remember when I was incarcerated, and I would say like, "Oh, the dirty detective so-and-so,"
Yeah.
right? As if like, right?
Right.
I mean, they probably should have gone through standard protocols.
Yes.
I'm not giving them a pass.
No, it's LA cops though. I mean, what do you expect?
It was a known group in
yeah.
Culver City
Sure.
police. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And when I was arrested, I was wearing a Burberry golf glove, driving a Mercedes.
Okay.
And it was always a Marlboro Red.
Yes.
And I played loud music with tinted windows. I couldn't not.
Right.
I couldn't not do it.
Makes sense.
It was also like a reverse psychology strategy. You kind of figure like they wouldn't think someone would be so dumb to be bumping on like this type of a car with the tinted windows and like be, packing, right? Like, and like, so it worked for a little while. Of course, like, I probably took advantage of my appearance, the socially advantaged group, right?
Right.
But that stopped working and it all kind of came to an end. And so there was, another treatment attempt. And then finally, the criminal justice system, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So after going through all that and then dealing with whatever, did you go do some time or were you locked up for a bit?
Yeah. In 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, sobriety.
Yeah. I
came
ended
into
up
effect?
transitioning to a nonprofit treatment center right there in my own backyard.
Right.
Literally walking distance from my high school, literally walking distance from where we used to make moves, right there in Culver City on Venice Boulevard,
Right.
in my own neck of the woods.
Right.
And I got to start over from scratch. And one of the coolest things that I did when I got there was that I stopped telling all those stories about the people that I knew, the cars that I used to drive.
Why did you stop telling the
It
stories?
got tired, man. Especially after being locked
Nobody
up.
said anything to you. You just figured it out on your own. Like, I got to stop talking like this.
I figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because especially if you're locked up, you just have time and you just tell stories with people.
Yes.
And you're just like kind of going back over the things you did and
Yeah.
the people you knew.
Or who you think you are.
Who you
Yeah.
think you are. And it got really, really tired. You know what I mean? So when I got to this new facility, I was still wearing some of the clothes
Yeah.
because I didn't have other clothes. Right. But that even started to feel uncomfortable, and I was like, okay, I'm going to like take the mask off.
How old were you then?
24.
You got sober at 24?
24, 90 days before my 25th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. Just a baby boy,
Yeah.
truly just a baby boy. But I had been through a lot, from age
Absolutely.
17 to 24.
Yeah.
I'd been through a lot.
I think you had done enough dirt in that amount of time that some people do in like a few decades worth of
Correct.
addiction.
And I stayed up for 3 and 4 and 5 days at a time pretty regularly,
Right.
So yeah, I didn't feel like there was a lot left out there for me that I needed to
Sure.
explore. One of the other big things that I did was there were people that, owed me money and I let it all go.
Yeah.
I was sick in treatment, like fantasizing. I collected a few,
Yeah.
like a few that seemed important, but like the list had to go, bro.
Right.
It wasn't going to live with me on. It was, you know what I mean?
Just let it go.
I let it go. You know what I mean? And it was huge.
I mean, what was it was there one specific thing that became a turning point for you to make this decision to want to be 100% sober moving forward? Or was it a series of events during that time? I mean, a lot of people go to treatment a lot of times and they really don't ever stay sober.
Yeah, I can't say that it was an event, but I can say that I ended up in a place that nurtured spirituality and it resonated with me.
Nice.
Like I had a drug and alcohol counselor who I felt like understood me
Right.
and I was going to respect him. And I remember I actually had a stash spot.
Yeah.
I had a safe somewhere and I had a couple, I call it an emergency break glass kit somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I had some things aging for a little while. And I remember one day telling him, yeah, we got to go clean something out. And I remember he came like on a Sunday.
You just wanted to get honest. Like I have this thing.
I have this thing. Yeah,
we need to
gotta
go clear this thing out.
Get rid of all this stuff,
yeah.
right? And I remember that was a huge turning point.
Sure.
And I remember because I felt like the guy used to get high the way I did.
Yeah.
I think he got down.
That counselor.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember I had some things and he was going to go flush them. And he went to the bathroom and I remember kind of following him and like I had to make sure that he flushed it as opposed to like him taking it or something.
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
looked back at me. He was like, "Don't worry, bro. I'm going to flush it."
Yeah.
And so yeah, we still have a relationship to this day. But
Really?
you just never know when the pivotal events are going to happen.
Yep.
When people are going to really reach you deep down where you live and when you're going to stand at the turning point and when there's going to be moments that alter the trajectory of your life.
Yes.
And that was definitely one of them. And there were others. Of course, there was like, I called every day to see if I had to test.
Yeah.
There was a lot of other factors. I had debt. All my stuff was in storage. I was now like, wearing sweatpants at a rehab and like they forced me to work at a thrift store.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And like, I hoped no one saw me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I was unwell.
Uh-huh.
I was unwell. And yeah, I got into exercise.
Right.
I got into eating differently, and I started changing so fast, bro.
Meaning eating well
Yes.
and exercising well?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you in that center?
I lived there for 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
After the 6 months, did you go? You said you went back to school
Yes.
and you went back to USC.
Yes.
All right.
I had taken a year and a half off. I had 20 units left, and I had to get my GPA up to a 2.0.
Oh,
So
it
you
was that
can't-
low.
It was that low. You can't graduate.
You?
Me. Dr. Wiss.
Yeah. I would never imagine
Yeah. Yeah. You
those
can,
numbers with you.
but you can imagine the circumstances of
Sure.
my life at the time.
Yeah, you weren't in your right
switching
mind.
majors.
Yeah.
You know what else is funny?
Huh.
At USC, I took a nutrition class, and I dropped. I dropped out. I couldn't hang
When you were loaded.
when I was loaded.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I went to the Art Institute as an artist, and I had
Yeah.
academic probation twice, and then also just walked off the
Yeah.
campus. Like, you don't belong here.
Yeah. I'm a nutrition class dropout.
Right.
Turned.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Turned into a scientist, nutritionist, all of it.
All of the above.
So you went back to school. Were you living at the school or like on the
Believe
dorms?
it or not, I actually was able to go back to school from the treatment center. This was like the coolest thing ever.
So you were staying in the treatment center but going to school.
Yeah, like 4 months in, I started, I think a summer and then, I had to do a spring and a summer to get my
Nice.
20 units.
Very
And I had to
nice.
get all A's to like bring it up.
And you did?
And this place supported me. They
Right.
said, we want you to go back to school,
Yeah.
finish. And it was such a tender time. And I am grateful for the facility that housed me and still stay connected to that community.
Oh, they're great. I know them. They're great. And you know what? I'm trying to just imagine like this young man comes into their place. The Dave I know, if I was your counselor, I'd be like, listen, we need to get this kid back into education, right? Like he's like a smart kid. He's
Thank
not,
you.
There's a lot of kids that just want to get sober and go work somewhere, but like you need to go and continue your education. So that's cool that they supported you. They should have, because look what the outcome is.
Thank
They
you.
probably knew that deep down inside. So you said you got into exercise, you got into eating well. Getting into exercise, were you a person that exercised before you got sober?
No, I had always wanted to.
Yeah.
I definitely had an interest in having health and a attractive physique, but those just weren't things that I could pull off.
Okay.
Right. And so when I got sober in 2006, there was a gym, and I had a friend who I'm still in contact with today
Yeah.
that was working out, and he took me under his wing and he showed me how to lift weights.
Right.
And I started drinking water, and then we went on the rooftop to get sun, and they started putting out food. A lot of it I just had never eaten before. I went to the salad bar and I just started, no one told me what to do.
Right.
It wasn't like, there was a nutritionist or a trainer. Like I was smart enough to know that the stuff I was doing before wasn't really working well. Maybe I should do different things.
Right.
And I just started feeding myself, and it really came from a sense of optimism
Okay.
about the future for me.
And how many more years did you go to school at that point?
I had to go back just for, I think at 10, 11 months sober, I finished my bachelor's.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it was like, I thought the whole world would be ready to give me a job because I had a bachelor's degree and 5 felony convictions, and it was difficult.
That wasn't happening.
No, it wasn't happening.
So what, did you have to just further your education?
Yeah. And that was a tricky turning point for me too, because, I didn't have a lot of financial resources. I started working as a personal trainer. That was my first real job in sobriety.
Okay.
Because I kind of had become obsessed
With working out.
training
Yeah.
and with nutrition in a positive way, but I wanted to help people with it. And I was able to get into the wellness field, which was super perfect fit for me and my background. I remember the prospect of going to graduate school,
Right.
getting a master's degree. And at the time, there was some potential work for me. I remember I had a buddy who, a lot of people in sobriety, they were like selling printer ink.
Right.
I don't know if you knew anyone. There was like some groups of people that, you do sales.
Yeah.
If you have a criminal background, so they'll take you in. You can cold call people all day long.
Cold calling for toner. I used to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was really close to taking that And I'm pretty sure if I did that, I would have done well
Yeah.
because I naturally have that.
Yeah.
And it could have turned into something and I could have become like a business person,
Sure,
sales type.
Sure.
But I had a strong call to do more education. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
And it was a difficult call to make because it meant for sure I was going to be broke for another several years.
And were you?
I was broke.
And where were you living all those years?
Yeah. So when I moved out of treatment, I moved in with a buddy who I went to high school with,
Right.
who had a small condo in Culver City, and he rented me a small room at like $600 a month.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like I could pull that off. And it was difficult times when I think back to those early days, man, having like no money, still paying off debt, going to like 2 meetings a day.
Right.
That was the good stuff, man.
Right, right.
You know, just like super hungry for a different life.
Right.
I moved from there into a rent controlled studio apartment in Santa Monica.
Okay.
In this old home.
Right.
It was literally the size of this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was there for many years. There was a time when I lost my driver's license from the case.
Right.
The DMV like refiled on me and
From your past case.
and I didn't have my license for a period of time. Started walking a lot. And I lived near 26 and Broadway.
Right, right,
I
right.
could walk over there, which was super cool.
Nice.
I ended up getting the chance. I had to go back to community college to get some core science classes so that I could go on to get a master's in nutrition.
Okay.
And that came from my work as a trainer, me wanting to be legitimate, you know what I mean? To like actually be, a healthcare provider.
And that's what you wanted to be at this point. You were like driven, since you had a bachelor's, to go get a master's, and nutrition had become your thing.
Yes.
It was your like niche.
Yes.
Yeah.
It changed my life.
Right.
In a way that people noticed, to the point where people asked me for my advice.
Right.
And like people offered to pay me. Pretty soon I'm like walking the Whole Foods aisle with someone.
Right.
And I'm like, I could charge for this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it kind of chose me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
The universe set that up.
Right.
And it was very clear that was going to be my lane. I wasn't sure like what the options were. There's different ways to enter the nutrition space. The recognized route in the, Western medicine healthcare system is a registered dietitian nutritionist. And so I went down that path. And, let's be honest, I also had like a pretty tricky track record. So it's not like I could easily go to medical school or law school. You know what I'm saying? Like I had big gaps. I had to like do something that was accessible. And I even had a hard time getting in to Cal State Northridge.
Is that where you went?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I had a hard time getting in.
Why?
Because I had a 2.0.
Oh,
Yeah.
still low GPA.
Yeah. So I had to go to SMC to get my grades up. And I ended up going to SMC for like a year and a half.
And what'd you get your grades up to?
I had to get it up to like their bare minimum.
Okay.
Like a 2.7 over the last 65 units or something. So I had to crush. So here I am in early sobriety, going to like community college,
Right.
hitting the gym every day, starting to take pre-workout supplements.
Here we go.
You know what I mean? And getting into bodybuilding.
Right.
Yeah. And that was it was exciting. You know what I mean?
And when you're young, taking pre-workout isn't something that you're really thinking like, this is not good for my health or my head.
It feels entirely supportive. It does.
Because it gives you the energy to be able to go and kick ass in the gym.
If you think about it, it's the ultimate interaction between caffeine, which is dopaminergic, weights, which, stimulates testosterone.
Right.
And then the rap music in my earphones stimulates the old memories.
Right.
And then you put me in the mirror and I'm starting to see changes in my body.
Sure.
It's the ultimate high in sobriety, bro.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's people that are listening that know what I'm talking about. And it's hard to tell someone who finds that after being unwell for many years that that's a problem. It doesn't feel like a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not even saying it is.
Right.
But, fast forward a decade later, it can become one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why don't you expand on that? How did it become a problem? What happened?
Oh, you want me to get into the caffeine story?
Get into the caffeine story.
The caffeine story is gnarly.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone's different. For me, and I've done, like genetic testing to find out that I'm like, I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine. So I'd be more likely to consume more than other people.
Right.
But I wasn't into it when I was growing up. I mean, I drank Mountain Dews when I was using,
Right.
but I never assigned any value to caffeine. When I went to my first treatment center, I remember, like going on a break and getting a Frappuccino and being like, oh, right? It's not just the sugar in there.
Yeah.
My mood has changed, right? That's why when people in recovery talk about having taken a mind-altering substance, I'm like, I don't know if you have what I have, but like a large Frappuccino.
That should alter the mind.
That will absolutely change my neural pathways and change my mood, right? And so I knew that early on. And the pre-workouts is really kind of where it started. I mean, coffee at recovery meetings, of course, right? Normative behavior. But yeah, when I found the pre-workouts and I started lifting weights every day, 2-hour weight sessions, I probably started with, 1 scoop. And then, you start doing research and you find out that there's weird other, brands and stuff out there. I'll be honest, I took some stuff a few times where I was like, I don't even know if I'm still sober. I'll be honest with you. You know what I mean? I took some stuff.
One more sip, it's a slip.
I'm tingling. You know what I mean? I'm checking out porno videos. You know what I mean? Like I'm on one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I found out later that there are some substances in some of those that are, stimulants.
Sure.
Stimulants, straight up. And some slide in.
Yeah.
And, you kind of learn which ones are safe. But the ones that were good were the ones that hit the scene. Everyone goes nuts over them.
Right.
And then they get banned because, someone has a negative outcome, right?
Yeah.
Someone dies or
Some
something.
motherfucker
happens.
has a heart attack.
But there was a few that hit the scene. It's been so long I couldn't remember the names, but I would get them on a multiple choice.
Yeah.
There were some good ones.
Right.
Jacked.
Right.
Jacked 3D, I think it was called.
Right.
That one was on the scene, yo. Yeah, that was a thing, 2000.
That shit'll get you jacked.
Hey, it's jacked.
It lived up to
bro.
its name.
Woo! I got into raving again when I was sober.
Okay.
Yeah, 2007, 2008, the
Right.
dubstep scene
so
hit
good.
LA. I was super into it.
Right.
And it wouldn't be strange for young Dave,
Right.
2 years sober, to take a scoop of the jacked 3D
And
and,
go
hit
to
the
rave.
dubstep thing on a Friday night.
Right.
And just crush the dance floor.
Yes.
And just have everyone like in awe, like thinking I was like
And he's sober.
sober. You're like, can I have what you have? And I
Exactly.
reach into my cargo pocket and I pull out a protein bar.
Sure.
I'm like, and they're like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Whoa,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going on?
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm like, I'm in the the tank top and I'm starting to feel ripped, right?
yeah.
And the caffeine was a huge source of support for the pursuit of fitness.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if you take the full dose or the double dose, you almost have to work out to get it out of you.
Right.
There is no like, oh, I did a half workout. Like it's like you got the beta alanine.
Yeah, no,
you have to clear your system of it.
You need a pump.
It's a full workout. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I did that for many, many years and started to suspect that it probably wasn't, a good long-term strategy. But there was a time when I was smart enough to know that if I wanted to get the best benefit from the caffeine and the working out, that I should stop drinking coffee.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it was like, there were times when I would like have coffee in the morning and then have a pre-workout during the afternoon and then have like an evening cup of coffee and I go to sleep. I go to sleep fine. Once you reach a certain level,
Yeah, you
it's
can
no
sleep on
longer.
that
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. It's no longer. There used to be an 11 o'clock spot in Culver City. Drink the late night meeting and go right to bed.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of like, on meth, you go out to eat,
Right.
at some point. They have a reverse effect.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I went through different phases where I was like super high dose,
Right.
knowing that I should dial it down. But there were no issues for me. There were actually no presenting problems. It was only supportive. And it felt like something I could continue.
Until it didn't.
I'm going to say it was like probably 8 years of pre-workout and lifting weights until I realized that I couldn't work out without it. And it was a real problem.
Mentally.
Yes. I knew that I was like dependent on that for a workout and that the workout was linked to my mental health. And I knew that I had developed like a dependency on caffeine as a stimulant
Right.
to support my daily life.
You ended up having to go to therapy for a little while and talk about this stuff, huh?
I mean, to be honest, like, I had periods of abstinence.
From caffeine.
Yes.
What's the
Yes.
longest period that you would go?
So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of the story.
Sure.
Probably like 2017, I like gave it a full like quit.
Right.
You know what I mean? It took me several weeks.
As in no pre-workout, no coffee, no nothing.
I wanted to establish my relationship with exercise without the pre-workout. And it took me several weeks of like not being able to work out before I was actually able to train again. And
Just low energy or just
I was just low energy, low motivation.
no motivation.
But after a few weeks, I found that my training was better than ever because it affects my nervous system. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I realized, I was like, oh my God, like I am a better person without caffeine.
So you really didn't need it.
And I started to move away from it, and I started to have my life open up a little bit. And then I got into a PhD program
Ooh.
at UCLA. Can you imagine? Right. And so
lots of studying.
oh my God, I'm
And
finally
there's no Adderall
like,
in the
I'm-
mix these
no
days.
Adderall. I'm finally like, okay, I found some sanity with the caffeine. The PhD program was extremely challenging for me because I worked full time and I was in a full-time program, and I kind of kept my work as a secret. I didn't get financial aid, so I was paying my own way.
Right.
And, you know, it was a hostile environment for me. The program, the department was.
Yeah.
A lot of social justice issues. It was a difficult time for me. And I remember like needing, you know, coffee to get through it,
Right.
which is very normal.
Right.
It's a normal behavior. We would all get coffee together, but I was the only one getting coffee that had 8 years of 2 scoops of pre-workout per day,
Right.
plus a late night coffee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like it just did something a little bit different for me. And I just want to clarify, when I drink coffee, I don't get wired. I'm not like, oh, I'm getting tweaked out, you know, cracked out feeling.
Did you get normalized?
I just get dopamine.
Oh, okay.
That's it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just reduces my negative affect.
Sure.
So it's not even something that like, of course I get a focusing effect,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more about me using it like a substance to make negative emotionality go away.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So like I'll have a rough class, you know, and I got to go to another class and just grab one in between. It's not like I need to stay awake. I just need a drug.
Right. Something to just
And that's what it became.
do, yeah.
That's what it became.
yeah.
Right. And so, you know, through the PhD program, there was a lot of coffee and me trying to not, you know, use pre-workouts anymore, going on it, going off of it. And I remember hitting a few low spots just to, you know, highlight some of the bottoms. There was a time when I was like off pre-workouts, and then at the gym, they sold these, I guess, bangs, the 300 milligram.
Yeah.
Right. I remember like going there to the gym one day and just getting the large ones.
Yeah.
And just walking on the treadmill and drinking it, not even working out. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't even working out anymore.
Right,
I went to the gym for the bang.
Right.
You
Right.
get what I'm
right,
saying?
Right, right.
Yeah. It turned into that kind of party.
Yeah.
Anyways, I started talking about it to my friends in recovery, and no one feel like they got me. They're like, dude, you're tripping, bro. Why are you being so hard on yourself?
Right.
We're sober. Like, why are you making such a big deal out of this? And I felt like no one understood that when I am like off caffeine, I'm a less anxious person. I'm a better human being. I go to sleep at a regular hour. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I had a lot of people that I could share it with. So I kind of kept it a secret. You know what I mean? A couple people I shared with, I've shared with you over the years.
Yeah.
And again, it's like I tell someone like, bro, I'm struggling, fuck, back on the bean. You
Right,
know what I
right,
mean?
right.
And then I get the weird look. But in 2020, I decided I had some really difficult times in my program, and I couldn't sleep well.
Right.
And I was like having like, you know, PTSD symptoms. I felt like the program was trying to get me out. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
I wanted to do the kind of research that I wanted to do.
Sure.
Nutrition, right? Mental health. They
Right.
just weren't into it. And
Right.
you know me,
Right.
I'm pushing for it, having issues.
Thinking outside the box and
Thinking
something
outside
they
the
don't
box,
agree
bro.
with it.
Nah, they don't want you to think outside the box. They told me they did when they admitted me.
Right.
They said, we want out of the box thinkers. And when you get there, they're like, no, we want assistants. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was problematic. But needless to say, I had sleep difficulties. And I went into therapy at that time to work through some challenges I was having
Right.
with the PhD program because I wasn't sure that I was going to continue.
Okay. So you just brought up the whole caffeine issue there.
Yeah, I mean, it was someone that specializes in addiction.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
That's great.
Yeah, to help understand, you know, all the different dynamics that are at play.
Right.
But yeah, I'll add this piece. This is just a small tidbit. I did get a bodybuilding injury I had sciatica from deadlifting. So I wasn't able to like push the limit on that. So those days were kind of over. It's more yoga now.
Right.
Trying to look after my nervous system, get good sleep. And I put together.
When you got the injury, was that anything to do with doing the pre-workout and overexerting yourself, perhaps?
100%.
That's what it was.
Just from me being on that
Straining.
seeking,
Yeah.
Push it to the next
More.
level. Put on the straps and go for a new record.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hurt myself. I never thought it would happen, but it happened to me. The bodybuilding injury from going too hard.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it recreated itself a few times. 2020, midway through the PhD program, I got off caffeine and like I was able to like doing yoga, practicing meditation. Like I was very, very clear on my need to be caffeine sober.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember like, sharing it with people, but also feeling misunderstood. And this was the time that I met my wife, the girl of my dreams. I never thought I could pull it off, but it was me being caffeine sober and being able to be clear with who I am, right? That allowed me to, even, have the capacity spiritually, emotionally, mentally to pull it off.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my whole world opened up during that time. And it was like a really awesome period. Of course, I was still in the PhD program. So like the caffeine legacy, continued.
Right.
And it's like, I don't want to belabor it, but if I were to kind of summarize a few things, if I were to like analyze the data of my life from 2017 to now, like the last 7 years of when I first quit caffeine, if I were to code it up into like zeros and ones, there would be a very clear pattern of like Dave Wiss on caffeine, Dave Wiss off caffeine, right? Yeah. On caffeine is a very well version of me that is optimistic, makes positive predictions, and can deal with any adversity. The on the caffeine version with me is me trying to force things out of life, trying to like stay up late, workaholic tendencies, and the sleep deprivation mixed with the extremes, right, has led itself to some mental health low spots. You know what I mean? Where like I have like subtle breakdowns. I'm starting to make very negative predictions about my life, right? And this is like an important part of mental health. Sure. If someone is like, feeling unwell, feeling unsafe, suspicious, paranoid, thinking things are going to work out negatively, right? It's very difficult to live a peaceful life.
You're going to lose your shit.
I lost my shit a few times, bro.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I got to get off caffeine again. And like, I've done that, over and over again, enough times to know that caffeine is powerful enough. Like, even though it's a subtle addiction that's socially acceptable, it's powerful enough to destroy my mental health and to really affect my life. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So with all that said, were you a nicotine user, smoker, snuffer, any of that throughout all of this?
So yeah, I guess, I've got my little dirty little secrets and we're just going to air them out today. Huh?
Okay.
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Yeah. When I get into my wild workaholic tendencies, and this started in my master's program for the master's thesis, I learned about dip.
Right.
And it turns out that nicotine is very stimulating and has very focusing qualities. And I found early on that, a dip can get me typing. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm going to say it. I've pulled all-nighters on like Red Bull and Copenhagen Long Cut.
Wow.
To get my master's thesis. This is 10 years ago. Bro.
Right.
You know
I was going to say. This ain't the Dave I know. The Dave I know wouldn't touch none of that Red Bull shit.
And the Dave, also wouldn't like share about these things super openly.
I love your transparency.
You know what I'm saying? To come through on the other side and be like, long-term separated from these things. But yeah, the nicotine and, I smoked when I was using and I smoked in early recovery.
Yes.
But it doesn't do anything for me because I want to work.
Right.
It's like the tweaker in me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It needs to do something for you.
The vape.
Yeah.
It doesn't like get me focused.
Right.
And so, when I was in my PhD program, I learned how to code.
Right.
I had to do statistical analysis and there would be times when I would have to code for 8 hours and like some of that stuff crept in.
Sure.
Yeah. And so like, and then I get terrible nightmares from nicotine. And then it's like you get a terrible night's sleep, wake up in the morning, coffee,
Sure.
recreate, and then within a few days, I'm unwell again.
Mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? And then I can rationalize it early on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And be like, this is an important purpose that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
This is important work that I'm doing.
Right.
And I got to do this, and by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some validity to that.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that at some point,
Yeah.
it's called the point of diminishing returns.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Is that like the things that work, they stop working. You know, you hear it all the time in the rooms. It stopped working,
Yeah.
right? And you know, I definitely had that experience with the stimulants.
Mm. Interesting. I smoked for the first 7 years of my recovery. I was a cigarette smoker. I wasn't into vapes. It was a love-hate relationship. I was asthmatic growing up, so it was my last vice.
Mm.
I mean, next to food,
Sure.
but definitely it was. I needed it, so I thought that it was controlling my anger, but it was actually intensifying it more,
Sure.
or stress levels or whatever, even some of them that I would create myself. But I did read Alan Carr's book it was 9 years ago, Easy Way to Stop Smoking. I got a few chapters in and I was like, oh, I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And I quit.
I've actually learned a lot about addiction from my journeys with caffeine and nicotine over the last 17 years.
Yeah.
I've been able to observe that, like, if I do a 2 or 3 day run for the sake of writing a peer-reviewed manuscript. By the way, I have 20 peer-reviewed papers, right? Some of them like reek of like all-nighters, you know what I'm saying? I look at, there's a paper that I have on sugar addiction from 2018. I look at that, I'm like, I remember
I know what I
did to get that paper
that was
published.
a caffeine
you know what I mean?
driven.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Right, right.
But there would be times when I would go through 2 or 3 days on a run to like, let me sidetrack for a second. I've done inventory on this stuff.
Right.
Part of the reason why I have this workaholic tendency is because I've given birth to this idea that I'm behind in life. And then I have to work really hard to catch up.
Right.
Because there were years when I just blew it. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't do anything. And it took me a lot of years to like get into the workforce. Right. And even after growing up, getting a PhD, getting married, settling down, I still have this underlying theme that I need to like work hard to get ahead, when in reality, I'm doing great.
Right.
No hurries, no worries. Yeah. Right. That is sort of my mantra now. But I learned a lot about the mind and the obsession of addiction from my escapades with caffeine and nicotine. And what I mean by that is I could go on like a little run and then, I'll watch what happens on the day that I stop. Right. And just observe the mind. You know what I'm saying? And what I've learned is that, of course, like, if I drive by the street, I see the green Starbucks goddess, like it's more salient. The green pops out at me more. The same way that a drug user would, like remembering the dope spot. You know what I'm saying?
I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into designing their logo and their like what they have going on. It's what catches our eyes.
It catches.
Same goes with fast food.
Yes.
The style of the way the lettering is.
The pattern recognition.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, I know what they have there. The Big Mac, right? Like the double M's.
Genius.
Which then brings us to, did you still want to talk about that?
Yeah, one final point is I watched how my mind would create negative affect on the days that I would quit.
Oh.
So I learned how, people use substances to get rid of negative emotions. Sure. But by using substances, it actually creates negative emotions. And that is the cycle of withdrawal that we understand. So I could be a perfectly well person, a sober person, a wellness professional, someone who does yoga, and then go on like a little run of sugar, caffeine, nicotine for a few days. Right. And then the day that I try to stop, I'm having negative thoughts and negative emotions. And that is my brain's way of telling me you need to go do one of those things to make these go away. So I was able to really deeply dive into addiction and observe the traps that the mind creates to basically recreate the cycle. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there was a few times when it was like, it was hard for me. And there was a few times when I made firm resolutions not to drink coffee, and I drank coffee. Again. Plenty.
I was going to ask you, so how long has it been since any nicotine entered your body?
There was a little bit of messiness in January
Okay.
Yeah. I think
Messiness as in dip?
yeah, there was the little pouches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do you say messiness? Why?
Well, I think this is, I guess I'll be super, super raw.
Uh-huh.
In December, I wrote 3 manuscripts.
Oh, so you're still okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And submitted
helps.
them.
Yeah.
And I went on like a little caffeine, nicotine thing. Little bender.
Yeah.
Right? So that I could be a workaholic.
Okay.
Just be honest.
Yeah.
And then, in January, some of those like were in peer review and sort of came back, and there was a lot of changes I had to make.
Right.
I ended up like getting rationalizing, right? Me getting messy again. And it was a little bit humbling because, I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I was pretty committed because my wife's pregnant to like being off caffeine, to being off caffeine this year. And I haven't been fully successful.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So Hunter S. Thompson did some of his best journalism when he was on drugs. When Dave wants to write a peer review, he a little bit of caffeine and a little bit of tobacco.
Sometimes the tobacco. and some of my best work has been without any of it.
Amazing.
I want to be crystal clear. You know what I mean?
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
So that brings us to, out of our topic, we've covered the nicotine, the exercise, the caffeine. You said ultra processed food addiction.
Yes.
Did you ever have a problem with ultra processed food?
I think it's safe to say that growing up, like I mentioned, I was.
And what is ultra processed food? Just so we're clear.
So there's a classification system called the NOVA classification that breaks food into 4 categories. The first is unprocessed or minimally processed foods, which you would think about like the corn on the cob, right? Just straight food. We have category 2, which is processed culinary ingredients, which are things like sugar, salts, fats, flavors that are added to foods.
Yes.
And then category 3 is called processed foods. This is a combination of category 1 and category 2 foods, where you take food and you do something to it to make it more palatable, to make it store longer, right? And this is a normal part of what we do for, retail or for restaurants, etc.
Right.
Ultra processed food is the final category. And these are foods that are made from a series of industrial practices that someone generally couldn't do at home that contain little, if any, intact category 1 foods. So we're thinking about the Pop-Tart, the Cheeto, right? The soda. These are things that no one could really make at home. I'm sure there's someone that could recreate some of these things to some extent.
That's junk food.
It's highly palatable food that doesn't resemble any of the food groups, right? And it's designed to be rewarding and activate the neural pathways.
Right.
Ultra processed food also includes a lot of these junky diet foods too, by the way.
Right.
Think about like a fat-free salad dressing or a low-carb bread, or there's just a lot of foods out there that are, as you said, junk. Right. I try not to over-label food, but ultra processed food is its own label now. Ultra processed food is negative to mental health and physical health. And it's what's associated with addiction. Right. So we used to call it food addiction. We started calling it ultra processed food addiction because we have a classification system to recognize what foods are addictive. Right. It's usually not the almond or the corn on the cob. Right. It's usually the chips, the soda, the pizza, the cookie, the
flavorful stuff,
highly rewarding food,
and the carbs.
Yes,
because you want those carbs because they're just like so rewarding. So you think,
and it's usually a combination of the carbs and the fat, right? Right. If you were to think about it, like if someone put a stick of butter, a bowl of flour, and a bowl of sugar on the table, none of it would look good. Right. But if you combine it and you bake it for 20 minutes, you get a sugar cookie. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a different experience. Yeah. So it's the combination of different flavors and things. So it's probably safe to say that I had addiction like eating growing up. It went away when I was using drugs, and it came back when I got sober.
Oh, did it?
But I probably used my exercise and my nutrition to make sure that didn't derail me. Okay. You know what I mean? Yes. But I never had like real disordered eating. I probably had exercise addiction, but I never like had real serious binge eating or anything like that. Okay. But I definitely had a lot of salience with ultra processed food. Salience is a word we use in research
Sure.
that describes the assignment of value to something. So when something is salient, it's more memorable. The brain remembers it. And this is important for people with addiction recovery.
Right.
We assign more value to something than the average person does. And therefore you're motivated to recreate that experience to do whatever it does to you neurochemically.
Right.
So yeah, I became very interested in food addiction and sugar addiction clinically and academically.
Right.
So a big part of the research that I've done is on eating disorders and ultra processed food addiction and how these things intersect with substance use disorder and, what to do about it and the neurobiology of it and the practical applications of it. So it's been a really exciting academic journey.
Yes.
This topic is met with a lot of resistance because the conversation around ultra processed food addiction points to big industries. It's not just like, oh, this person's a food addict and this person's not. It's basically saying this is a public health crisis. There's a lot of foods that are being produced by multinational billion-dollar corporations, and they are putting them on the marketplace and marketing them to children, right? And basically placing private profits ahead of public health, right? My PhD is in public health.
Yeah.
I have a minor in health psychology. So I don't just think about people, I think about groups, systems, and populations. And I've been very interested in ultra processed food addiction as a systemic issue that we could potentially address through food policy. The evidence is super strong that food is highly rewarding. And there are people that continue to use it despite negative consequences and that have the same obsessive thinking patterns that people have with caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, drugs, you name it, right? It's the same neural pathways. And there's a lot of people that suffer with addiction like eating and binge eating and even bulimia nervosa, which is, a big part of what I've done clinically for the last 11 years is working with people that have these types of issues.
Yes. I know that about you. Awesome stuff. So I'll come clean with you. During the pandemic, we were all confined to our homes for a while. I asked you to be my nutritionist. During the time, I knew that you were specializing in being a nutritionist for people in recovery.
That's right.
A lot of them that have had past substance abuse issues and mental health. And so when I took you on, I had a lot of ups and downs because I was confined in my house and gyms were closed. And I came up with every excuse of like, I'm not able to exercise now, at least in my own head. And I tried to take some of your instruction of things to eat. Some of it was actually kind of surprising. Like I didn't think that yogurt was going to be on there. I also already had high sugar. So some of the things that you told me I could eat, I thought, well, it became an excuse. And let me just, I won't go too far into this part. I did a ton of binge eating during that time. I had a lot of ups and downs with my weight. As a result, last year I was diagnosed, diabetic, right? High A1C, all that. So luckily it wasn't at a point where, I am on medication now, which I never really wanted to be.
Okay.
But now I've lost some weight. Now I'm working out and things are going good for me. But during that time, you had me using an app, and it wasn't your app. But since then, we're in 2024 now. You created an app.
Yes.
And the app that you created was, I believe, at least 2 years old now. Correct?
I've been working on it for 2 years, but it's only recently been released.
Been released. I thought it was released in Apple, but now an Android too.
Yeah, we're in both.
Okay, in both.
Yeah.
So tell us, and what is the name of the app?
The app is called Wise My Nutrition.
Okay.
So clinically working with people for many years, there's a couple apps that are out there that are basically focused on food logging.
Yes.
That promote someone to take a picture, do some checking and journaling, whatever feels appropriate.
Yeah.
I spent the last 11 years looking through people's food logs. You know what I mean? There's a lot of components to the apps that are on the marketplace that I like, and a lot of stuff that I don't like.
Right.
And I certainly had the idea at one point to create the perfect food log that would match, the client population that I work with. The popular nutrition apps out there track calories and macros and are very fitness focused and very math centric
Yes.
and very vanity focused. because I work with people that have addictions, mental health, depression, anxiety, you know, there's a need to be more eating disorder informed and more trauma informed and create ways for people to approach nutrition that doesn't feel so shallow.
Yes.
So to really promote a more deeper message that nutrition is not just calories, it's profound information that we send to our guts and to our brains on a daily basis. And so my goal is to create nutrition interventions that can heal the brain without taxing the mind.
Okay.
There are people's minds that want to just count and track and measure. And I had that kind of mind for a while when I first got into fitness. Like that's what I was into. So it's not like I'm poo-pooing on tracking macros.
You experienced that.
I've experienced that. But it's like, what about the person that's done that already?
Right.
And then like they're still binge eating, or they still have body image issues, they have gut issues, and they believe that that's the only approach left, right?
Right.
There's got to be something more. So it started with, Why is My Nutrition, the app started with, let's create a food log where people can, track food more qualitatively, identifying the food groups, seeing what the food group distribution is throughout the day, and to check in with hunger, fullness, and to journal, right? And then, of course, in recovery, a lot of us do a nightly review where you check back through the day and you look at intentions you set. Like, did I drink enough water? Did I get all the food groups, right? Did I get the right kind of fats, right? Whatever intention someone wants to set, it comes through in the nightly review. So it's basically working a program for food. Right. And so that's one component of the app. The other component is the connection feature, which would allow someone like me to follow my clients. It could also allow for two people in recovery to follow each other. So people can follow other people. It's obviously anonymous unless you know someone's username. So it's at the highest level of security. But once you know someone's username, you can access some of their information, whatever they decide to share with you. So it's a community building component too. And coaches can use it. People like case managers, people that are in, mental health counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists can use it with their clients, knowing that they're using nutrition to support their mental health, which is a different conversation than is currently being had. So it's a little bit of an uphill battle because it represents a paradigm shift. So it's not just talking about nutrition to change body weight or to change cholesterol. It's more like using nutrition to improve depression, to improve anxiety, et cetera. So the last part of it is a personalized program that uses mental health scores to give people targeted information on how to improve their mental health using nutrition and lifestyle medicine. So there's a series of 42 modules, high impact, high quality videos. There's meditations, cooking classes, recipes. It's basically capturing the experience of working with me clinically for 6 months over the course of, 6 weeks. Right. And that's assuming someone does a module every single day. But once you do a nightly review, it moves you to the next module. People that are doing the modules and working with a practitioner are getting life-changing results. You're basically getting all the education that you would need. And it doesn't teach people what to do. It teaches people how to think. It's not me saying like, oh, you need to eat this. This is what's okay for you and this is what's not. It's more like, these are all the different worlds of possibilities. These are the different things that resonate with people. Who are you? What are your barriers, right? Take that into consideration and start to develop guiding principles. So the app was built to be a recovery message, and it's deep, right? It's not just like nutrition and I think nutrition has a bad reputation. I think most people think, oh, a nutrition program, right? What are we going to do? And like, it's more about connecting to source energy, connecting to the plants, learning how to cook, bringing back joy and celebration, and going on a healing journey. It's a mental health healing journey, a transformative educational process that takes people from confusion to clarity. And it's dialectical in its thinking, which means that it doesn't promote like single food philosophies. It offers like this open-minded, open-hearted point of view. And it really resonates with people. And it's super exciting because I had to tweak it, put finishing touches on it. And we're finally at a place where, the food log is complete, the connection features, we got the notifications in there. And the program is incredible. There's a lot of free features. So like it's a low cost option for people. I built it because there's a lot of people that have called me over the years to seek my help and can't afford to see me regularly. So I also have an option to say, hey, I built an app. You can go through the modules. for less than the cost of talking to me for 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's a really cool resource for people that are in recovery, to share with their friends and connect to people. You can chat through the app. But the coolest part about an app, which is different than a book, I was going to write a book and I was like, don't write a book. No one reads books anymore. Make an app, because the app,
Right.
allows me to make it living, breathing. I can update it. If I hear a really good podcast, I can just slide it right into a module. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
I can change things as needed, because nutrition science is evolving. It moves over time. So I'm able to move along with it and just add new resources in there, bring in new teachers to come teach modules. I'm going to add some additional modules, something about night eating, or, different ways to think about exercise and recovery, and just keep adding in features and building community on there, and trying to be a part of a paradigm shift that we call nutritional psychology and nutritional psychiatry, which is like a really exciting time, because we've known this stuff, but the evidence is here. So now that we have the evidence, it's like, now we got to create the protocols and get people on board. But people aren't really searching for these terms. If you look, like, people aren't really searching diet for depression.
Right.
People don't really know, right? So right now we're still in the phase of like promoting awareness. People need to know that there's 7 randomized controlled trials that show nutrition improves depressive symptoms. People don't know this yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And once you know that, you're like, oh, maybe I can try using nutrition to improve my depression. Maybe the medications haven't worked well for me. Maybe I'm sober and I'm hitting a wall in my recovery. Maybe I'm on a lot of caffeine and I need to think about my beverages. Maybe I'm binge eating on ultra processed foods. Maybe I'm using nicotine and it's affecting my oral health. Maybe I have a whole world of cross addictions and I need an app-based program to help me get into recovery and stay there.
Right.
Yeah.
Powerful.
It's powerful.
Very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
For getting that going. I know that you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it.
A lot. And there was caffeine involved. You better believe. There was.
So you still do some private sessions and things like that for people?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, no matter what I do, I don't stop getting those calls. I work one-on-one with people all over the world. Very fortunate. There's been times when I think I want to, teach classes in academia or just focus on the app, but that is my real calling.
Do you have a website?
One-on-one. Yeah. Nutrition in Recovery is my clinical practice. I've been doing one-on-one work for 11 years.
Yeah.
I have a couple of dietitians that work alongside with me, and there's a way to contact me through that website.
Okay, great. Wonderful. This has been amazing having you here today. It's good to again, reconnect, see you, hear you. I always hold you in the highest regards. I believe that, as time goes, I told you this a couple years ago when I had you on here, but it was like we just did it via Zoom because it was the pandemic. I'd like to have you as a regular guest just because you are just a wealth of knowledge and information, and you help so many people. And at the end of the day, nutrition is key, right? I mean, I had to learn this the hard way, but now I'm on the other side of it. So
Yeah, you
it's
are.
going really good. And we will be signing off now. I appreciate anybody that's been watching today. Just so you know, please subscribe to the channel if you can. If you like the information, if you like the content that we have on this channel, please subscribe. Also share it with lots of people and like us and let people know about this recovery podcast, Peggy's Recovery Corner, and we'll have another guest on real soon.
And the app is called Wise Mind Nutrition.
Wise Mind Nutrition.
3 words.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, brother.